made some joke about having a bad day, and I taught her something about taking a picture, blah, 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 and we had like a 10-minute conversation. Was that abuse? She was losing it with this kid. Now, I don't report that. Now, 2 weeks later, there's a big thing in the paper, and that kid is dead. Okay? Was that my obligation to report that? But that is not that infrequent a situation. I'd say with a grocery store, if you go at 7 o'clock at night after work.
Did you have a reasonable basis to believe the kid was abused?
She was screaming, "I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to twist your arm." Yeah, that's what was happening. Right? But when you calmed her down, she was having a bad day. There was no injury to the kid. The kid was talking to me. So I didn't call CYF. But that happens a lot in your context as a parent, at your kid's school, in a grocery store. I think it opens, it's not that it's necessarily, I don't think it's saying that we're not protecting kids. I'm just saying we want to help kids. And I suspect I did a lot more for that mother in the conversation. If I called CYF, they couldn't do anything. If I'm only calling because I don't want to be sued later if something happens, that's not what mandated reporting is about.
Well,
right?
if I'm married, did you have something?
Only, what if there's a specific disclosure, to go to your example of the high school teacher watching a movie and there's a student, what if there's a specific disclosure to a mandated reporter by a child? So it's a threshold above.
I like that.
That's different. Right,
Because that, again, pulls it back into the professional relationship.
Right, it is back into that.
Well, before we get to that, the simple, bald proposition that if you're on this big list, you're a reporter 24 hours a day, without regard to whether it's related to your professional employment, if you see something that amounts to child abuse. Jason would propose that we write this so that that obligation is clearly imposed. How many are in support of that position? Raise your hand. Jason raises his hand. One, well, actually, it's only.
I don't vote.
Yeah, that's
I agree
right.
with him.
Anybody else who has a vote here? Okay, that fails.
I understand that. Is there methodology in these reports to note dissent? Because I can't feel more strongly about that issue.
Sure. Well, I mean, we haven't gotten around to writing
I
a
understand.
report. I'm not, it's a free country. You can, and let me just say, as we go through these, anybody who wants to write as a member of the panel an addendum, I don't agree with the following, it's fine with me. We're just kind of slogging through this as the best we can. Okay, we've made that policy decision. However, I think your point is well taken. Why don't we do some drafting on the issue that where there is a disclosure that relates to the professional, the reason you're licensed to begin with, or a relationship established in that capacity, that there is an obligation.
Can I bring up again about the attorney? I'm concerned about, I'd like to see the attorney, but with the clergy where.
Oh, yeah, there has to be.
But I'd like to see the attorney. We have so many attorneys that are involved in cases, as guardian ad litems. Every case has sometimes 5 attorneys on it. If those attorneys aren't representing that parent or the person, why shouldn't they have a duty to report?
Well, wait a minute. Why are they different than the accountant?
Confidentiality.
You got the
Because-
tax lawyer. What's the tax lawyer, the patent lawyer got to do with mandated reporting?
Well, an attorney during the course of his employment, occupation, so if it's an attorney that deals with children, he should have that obligation. If he's an attorney that doesn't deal with children, then I don't think he has that obligation. I'm just talking about the ones that are with kids. Some of these attorneys see kids more than anyone else do, especially in our GALs. They see kids all the time.
I don't have a problem with the GAL having to do that.
But I'm saying through the, do we take that part out through the course of their employment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking, if there's a way to specify, if you're an attorney who works with children, you have that obligation to report.
See, the only,
Lawyers have we're not taking
well,
that.
we're confidential communications
I don't
has
have
to
a
be
problem with
accepted,
that,
has to be
right.
accepted.
That's
So
fine.
if you're a defense attorney, or if you're just an attorney
Representing
representing
that parent.
somebody,
Right. Because frequently they do know things, and kids do talk. If they have a relationship with their child, and the child they're representing says, you know what, 2 years ago, such and such, I was abused before. Many of these kids were abused repeatedly. And they approach that and tell their attorney, that attorney should have the obligation to report if they're,
I'm sorry. It
unless
starts
it's a
with
confidential
connection to
communication, if
the
that's
child
possible.
to the employment. So a guardian ad litem would come under that.
Right.
The attorney would come under that. Already, that in connection to the child
Right.
in the course of employment. And
Right.
this is another example where you have an enumerated list that isn't supposed to be exclusive, but gets treated as exclusive.
I just had these
all the
questions
time.
asked to me about attorneys, that's why I wanted to throw it out there.
But this list is to be exclusive.
But I think a lawyer that's representing a child
Well,
Well, then we need to take, but
might
not that it's
say
It-
that
it
they have
absolutely should be.
attorney-client privilege.
Because you
Like,
suppose
I.
that-
With the child, I know, that
I
worries me.
co-taught a course in the law school at Penn, and I think that, and, you know, we had clients, and they were sometimes adolescents and sometimes older kids, and the lawyers and the legal teaching was that if that's your client, you have attorney-client privilege with that child. And
But we don't let doctors, we don't let anybody
well,
else
I
do
mean, that
that.
was one of the ways where doctors and lawyers, like, had very different approaches to children. Like,
Everything else would be confidential and remain confidential, except the disclosure of abuse.
You know,
Right,
nice-
they wouldn't be able to talk
Cindy,
about anything else.
Lawyers
just that.
lawyers can also breach privilege where they have, out in the
Where somebody's
language.
being harmed, right?
Yeah, the harm.
Imminent risk of death, and serious bodily injury, I think you can disclose that too.
so
there-
if someone is threatening to hurt themselves or hurt
Right.
others, or.
So there is already some precedent to accept that privilege. If you make it very narrow, I'm not suggesting for every lawyer, but if you're guardian ad litem, or if you're
Right,
in
if
a
you
custody
have-
case, or,
Right. If you're involved with it, if you're involved as any other professional with children's issues and with children, and you come in and you're with a child and the child discloses, you should have that duty to report it. And I'll tell you where this, I know it gets messy, but, you know, we've had a lot of situations in residential treatment facilities where an attorney represents a client and things are happening there and nothing gets done because nobody reports it. They don't report, like a child on child, adult on child.
I think whoever, the ADA or whoever represents lawyers is gonna have a problem with lawyers being mandated to.
But how do we?
Well, I'll tell you what,
we
for the
put
sake,
clergy in
for the
and not
sake of
lawyers.
moving this ahead,
Let's check it
we're-
out.
let's
Let's check it out. That's fine.
draft lawyers with the
Caveat.
confidentiality exclusion.
Yeah, that's fine.
And let's reach out to, maybe somebody can reach out to the Bar Association and see if they have any thoughts about it.
But can I ask a question, maybe I don't understand this.
Or we could double back actually to somebody like Frank Servone. His organization, he's testified already that his organization does a lot of this representing. See what.
I just have a question,
his
because
thought-
maybe I'm a defense attorney, and the client is the parent, and I go to visit the client at home, and the child is there with lots and lots of bruises, and it's clear that that's abuse. Am I not mandated to report in any way, because I'm not a mandated reporter? If that seems like there's something wrong with that, I understand my client, but that's not my client, but if I say anything, I'm hurting my client. So the question,
How's
right
it different
now,
than your
are they mandated?
receptionist?
But you know what I'm saying, that's a lawyer, so is that person a mandated reporter in that context? So should
I don't
they
think they're a mandated reporter. I don't know what context. I've been asked these questions. I can't find anything specific enough to tell people if they are or they're not.
Jason?
I'd like to make a suggestion, and I've been persuaded to change my position on something. I would like to suggest that everybody be a mandated reporter and change the consequences depending on your role and relationship. So that if you're a member of the general public without training, and you're not in a special role, it's a summary offense. If you're one of these enumerated people, then the consequences are more serious. And then we're done with this arguing about who and what, enumerating missing people. We're talking about protecting kids and getting them in the system.
Yeah, except you still have the same issues with regard to lawyers, for instance. If there's a privilege, and they can't report. We'll table that motion for the moment.
I'm
Jackie?
just curious, if we're talking about lawyers receiving confidential communications, I don't practice custody work, but a lot of our judges speak privately with kids, and I think they often believe that when the kids tell them something, that somebody else must already know it. So if there's a
attorney knows.
And they talk privately with these kids. They do it a lot of times when no one's there. So, I mean, if we're going to include attorneys, I think we should include judges to the extent that they're going to be having.
That'll be fun. Well,
Well, Jim, can you recommend the judiciary?
Why are we?
I think that one,
I don't- why are
if
we
we
struggling?
enact it, which might be fun, the Supreme Court enacts a rule.
Why are we protecting people that have information about children that are harmed?
Right.
No, that's the typical defense attorney, you know.
Well, it came from
We're
our
not
esteemed,
protecting, we're not protecting.
thanks to the personal dig, but it
Thinking
came
like
from
a-
our esteemed state
we're not-
police
I'm not an
officer.
attorney, I call it when I see it.
Yeah, we're not protecting them. The issue is, what is a realistic legal obligation to be, when can we realistically create a legal obligation? All right, we're going to draft and see what we think about lawyers. Judges, if somebody wants to pass that along to, well, actually,
I'll check with Judge.
yeah, Judge, we have a member of the judiciary on this panel, he's not here today. We can toss that to him.
Well, he's not here, so therefore we can include his. You weren't here, still.
Now,
They also mandate training for that.
there is I guess, a motion on the floor to make everybody a mandated reporter with a graduated sanctions, less serious for the general public and more serious for those who we've been talking about making mandated reporters up till now. We've heard Jason's position. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor of Jason's motion? I see only Jason. So duly noted of record, you can include that in your dissent.
Thank you.
And we move on. And I think we've thrashed out all the policy issues, and Johan, I yield the floor to you.
Can I just ask a
Oh,
question
yes.
on the issue? I think we're moving toward a point of where a mandated reporter hasn't come into contact with the child, but there's a disclosure made. What if the disclosure doesn't relate to that child, but a child? Because I think frequently that happens. I think it's an important distinction. If you're going to include disclosures, should there be an expectation that if you're a mandated reporter and the disclosure is that we have a reasonable basis to believe that a child has been abused, but it's limited to the disclosure made. So it's not just seeing, and I'm certainly aware of some situations where that has happened. And is that an expectation that should be?
Well, doesn't that go back to the reasonable cause to suspect? If the information coming before the mandated reporter appears to be credible information, this is the education part of this whole thing. Is we are going to have to train people that reasonable cause to suspect is a subjective standard, but it is a standard. So they're going to have to make up in their own mind, which is where people are going to struggle. I don't know, is it enough, isn't it enough?
But this isn't a child who's come
Right, but if
into
a
contact
child,
with the
right.
person.
Information comes.
But that is the issue that I actually am questioning too, and that when you say has a connection to the
Right.
child, I know that that's broader than we had before, but I'm thinking we might need to massage that. I'm not sure that it's still getting at people that we need to get at in the circumstances in which we need people to feel that level of, I have responsibility here, I need to take action.
Well, I propose that maybe we're not ready to move ahead, because I think we ought to get rid of that. I think we ought to seriously rethink it. And I would propose, for once, joining with Jason, I think you're getting this information in your professional capacity. So whether it's, I don't think there's any question of mandated report. Cindy, you're a mandated reporter. Little kid who maybe has also been abused says to you, oh yeah, but this is nothing to what my dad does to my little sister. You're going to report that, right?
husband has been sexually abusing his niece, okay? And I have, like, I have a difficulty with being a mandated reporter of, and Act 179 or whatever was changed that, right? It used to be like a child that came before me, and I remember when that first came out, I was like, oh my God, I'm siding with the Catholic priest, there's something wrong here. But like I had this challenge because I was a doctor, and now I was being asked to report like things that I didn't really own, parents owned, but they told me about. And it wasn't my suspicion, it was their statement or their suspicion. So it's, in medicine, it's a little bit challenging because you're asking us then to report anything that a parent tells you, like about something that's happened.
I suspect school teachers are gonna have the same problem. They're gonna have school teachers, are gonna have kids that come to them and tell them things about other kids. My daughter was in a similar situation where a classmate of hers disclosed something to her. My daughter was the one that told the teacher, not the little girl that it was happening to. And the question is that teacher gonna feel like that's enough under reasonable cause to suspect to believe that her mandated reporter requirement kicks in?
Well, in your instance, because that teacher is in a position of authority with regard to the child, even though the child didn't come to her directly, I would say yes.
Let's say
But
it's
it's
a child
yours,
that
I
doesn't
don't
have,
know.
you know,
Because it's hearsay about a child who's not
who we don't even
in your
know.
healthcare
We don't
institution.
even know.
Tell them to call trash line?
But,
How did you handle, I'm just curious how you handled this.
so normally what I do, if parents tell, I try to encourage them to make a
Right,
report.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Because it's their concern. But we see a lot of times where parents come, they bring us a concern, the child says nothing, we interview the child, they say nothing, their exam is perfectly fine, and we still have a parent's concern. We report that now, we didn't used to report that, but now we report that, and but in our report, we say, we're transmitting a parent's concern to you. Like, because parents will come to us in custody issues, in other issues, and they want, they're lawyers. Sometimes they say, my lawyer told me not to report it, come to you. And then I'm like, okay, thank you, lawyer. Okay, so just to meet a mandate, like, I know that if I don't have reasonable cause to suspect, I don't have a mandate, but I feel like I'm in a mandated reporter role.
You're not-
And so we make that report and let other people try to figure
But
that
you're
out.
not asked, the dilemma I think you have is focusing on, as a physician, the child coming before you, you examine and you develop, based upon your examination, this information. That profession's unique in that regard versus other ones. The teacher doesn't do a physical exam. You could still, the kid could come up and say, I'm sexually assaulted, I've been physically abused. And they still have to report. So there, to me, there's not, I understand your level of comfort or not, but the idea is you now have information. It's not your job to investigate or verify, like you do in your practice, is to get information to these guys so they can do their job.
But do I have a mandate to report a child who I've never even laid eyes on in my life?
I think you should. And I'll tell you, just as a practical matter, if we don't, we're now lumping teachers in with everybody else. If we don't, history tells us they are never, unless they see, oh, the rape didn't happen in front of me, you know, kid cried about it afterwards.
It's gonna continue
They
on
are
14.
never gonna report.
But just to
But yes.
So I think one of the questions we have too is, so let's take a situation where a parent comes into their primary care physician, says, I did this to my child. That child is seen by you, the pediatrician, so they're not under the care, guidance, supervision, or training of the PCP. So that would not be a mandatory report, correct?
I think I get rid of that language.
That's what
I
I'm
mean, to that extent, what Jason's saying, you know, I'm not gonna extend it to the grocery store,
yeah.
but if we're talking about the exercise of your profession, you come into that knowledge and information, whether or not you have diagnostic information, I think
But even if
you report.
even if we don't, like, it's a
With this
child.
custody, this has been an issue, we go back and forth, this is not a minor issue. For us, this is about 200 reports a year, where we have no knowledge, we have a parent in a custody fight who says, a judge or somebody goes, and we do it only to meet a mandated reporting requirement. And that's, if we're any indication of how often this happens, you have to be really careful, because it's gonna glut the system, and see why
Well-
the
parents, they may be trying to run it through you too, but the mother, in most cases, sexist assumption, who is willing to try and play that card is already calling Childline, is already calling the police. They may be being a little more subtle by trying to push it through you, but this is the one area where we do believe that the system is abused. We can't stop that. I would rather by all means, put in mother who is involved in custody dispute, told the kid to say this, but I think you report
Oh,
rather than.
I think you do, but I think if you start expanding times, people, then you're gonna get more and more of these. I agree, you can't do anything about it in this little context.
Yes.
In reference to the custody, I know how you feel about that, but if you're gonna give people all this power, some people who don't know how to use the power, there should be a penalty for them as well. If you're gonna penalize somebody for being a mandatory reporter, and they don't do it, and you penalize them, what about the person who abuses the power? They should be penalized as well. It has
One
an
of-
impact on the children's lives
Absolutely.
and
they should
and
be.
the system itself.
And one of the, separate subject, but I think one, and I forget whether I thought we had actually discussed it, but I think one of the things that everybody here agrees on is there's specific legislation that has already been introduced, and we've got the bill numbers, that we will be recommending to support, which enhance the penalties for false reports of.
I think we're going to enhance to beyond the existing proposed bill.
Great. Yeah, I mean, frankly, I forget the details. Hey,
Give a little more than that.
I give them a ticket.
I mean,
Yeah, we do need
there
to-
are always going to be proof problems.
It clogs our system out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
if I can try to summarize here, what I think from my own notes, we're gonna have a section that talks about mandatory reporters, who is required to report suspected child abuse. We're gonna start with a list of who must report based on whatever the profession is, the ultimate list. And then B, under what circumstances do you report? And you report on the basis of medical, professional, or other training or experience if you have reasonable cause to suspect that the child has been subjected to child abuse. And then we're going to say, that occurs if you, I'm still dealing with the connection phrase. In the course, it has to occur in the course of your employment, occupation, or practice, if you're directly or indirectly responsible for the child, or if you're in a position of authority within an agency that has direct or indirect responsibility for the child. Boom. Is that it?
I
So that would
believe
mean if a
does
mother
that
tells
cover-
me about a kid that I've never seen, I don't have any.
Well, you have to have reasonable cause.
I understand, but if a parent says to me,
Yes.
my ex-husband has been sexually abusing his nephew
Yes.
for 3 years.
Yes.
And, I don't know who this is. Am I mandated to report it?
Yes.
If you believe it's true. I mean, you have to have reasonable cause.
Chairman, excuse me, does that cover, the way she explained it, so you're saying that if I'm not in the course of my employment, I'm off duty as a police officer, I'm no longer a mandated reporter if I see something that,
Right.
we don't see a problem with that? Like as far as overall, like
Well,
if
if
I
you're
see
on
something.
duty and
Well-
you're coaching,
I'm
a
coaching my
sports
daughter's
organization,
softball
And
team.
you're
Then you're under this
covered
list.
as a coach.
You'd be covered
Okay,
as a
let's just
coach.
say that I'm not at a sporting event or something that's covered under that, and as a police officer being trained in it and stuff like that, I see something walking down the street, I don't know, whatever.
Nothing
Well,
mandates you,
I
but
mean-
you're not prohibited.
You're not,
Yeah,
you're
I'm
not
saying-
permitted
If you
to
say a
report it,
crime that's
but
not
if
child
you
abuse,
don't
then
do
you're required.
it, no one's going to arrest you and prosecute you for it.
Okay,
So if you're off duty, do you have to respond to a crime? Are you required?
depends on circumstances.
Like if I'm a doctor and I see a person dead on the street, I don't have to give CPR, right? I'm not obligated, but I'm going to do it because of it. No, it has to
Yeah.
have this, not
And
just
I-
child abuse,
and
we're
I
looking
think
at
that-
generally outside of
I
your
think that
office, what's
gets
your
at
obligation?
it's all well and good to say, what harm does it do and why shouldn't
No,
everybody?
I'm just thinking out loud, I just, up to, okay.
Well, I think that goes back to what Cindy was saying about legislating morality. You, as an individual, would report it no matter what. Cindy, as a doctor, is going to report it. If she believes there's a real issue, she's going to report it, whether she's in her office or not. But there may be people who say, no, I left the office, I'm not dealing with this, and are you gonna arrest them, and are you gonna prosecute them for that?
and again, you're a police officer, your primary function in life is to, you know, either prevent or deal with the consequences of just this kind of conduct. We're including x-ray technicians, we're including a whole wide universe of people. And I think it is a whole lot less incongruous to say, if I'm an x-ray technician, I don't have a relationship with this kid. The kid walks up to me and says, my dad had sex with me. You know, you think it's a human being, I mean, it's however unlikely that is, that they're gonna do something about that, like, hey, okay, honey, you know, who are you?
With the specific disclosure? Or-
No, it's gotta be,
Oh.
that's only at least, we
Okay.
have it drafted. and
I
that's
just
the
want to be able to
problem.
understand the way that it's going. That's all.
I mean, I'm just trying to look at the policy considerations and remembering that we're talking about really a criminal statute. We're gonna up the penalties for this. You could, hey, it's like, what, we're talking about misdemeanor of the first degree. So this is the equivalent of involuntary manslaughter. That's, you know, I think, that it's maybe, you know, as a cop, you're gonna do something anyway. As an awful lot of these people, you know, maybe the idea of some kind of a graduated sanction makes some kind of sense, but not as seriously as we want the real mandated reporters to take all of this. At least that's my rationale. If, hey, let me say, I'm trying to get a consensus and move ahead. If any of you want to, you know, conduct phone campaigns, you know, get votes for the next time, change people's minds, that's fine with me.
And there's just a lot of stuff thrown out there, I just wanted to understand.
Yeah,
what you were
okay,
saying there,
I mean, I'll let you know when I'm particularly advocating a position, but what the heck, if I advocate it, you know, beat me, drop on me. That's fine, we're just trying to get somewhere. Okay, so yeah, to that extent, we're including this. Now, something got mentioned that I'm not sure, do we want volunteer coaches?
Just add that. I think we do. I think you should, under 5, you have a specific enumeration of people associated with the school, and I think it should include a school volunteer. Most schools conduct volunteer training anyway for people that come in to volunteer at the school. And I think under 10, it's not really clear that the person could be a volunteer associated with a recreational, it says coach, employee.
Or 11.
Yeah, I mean, and I think number 10 should also indicate that it could be the actual program, an administrator of the program, or an institution which is sponsoring or providing for a program. Like in the situation of Penn State wouldn't fit under that criteria at all, because Penn State was merely providing the space for the program to occur, and the actual administrator of that would be referring to as a second mile administrator and not Penn State.
And we do, on that specific point, the free report, I thought gave a very nice definition for the concept of a non-student minor who's on the campus or a branch campus. So it's a non-student minor who's participating in, and then they have this laundry list of academics, sports camps, day camps, year-round activities, enrichment, student enrichment, leadership camps. So we'll work on incorporating that concept so that we're capturing. We also have to make clear with regard to colleges, they have a responsibility for students who are minors, which wasn't in their heads prior to Sandusky.
Right.
In addition to the non-student minor population who might be participating in all of these enrichment type of things or sports.
Okay, so if that's the intent, then we're talking about volunteers as well.
We get to volunteers, how about the contract?
Yeah.
Not school employees, but persons working under contract on the property of the school.
Food services.
It's funny because as we've moved through these, when we were working with redefining perpetrator and caretaker, we started bringing in those independent contractors and the employees and stuff. So as we evolve and we're coming into
At
those.
least one's on the ground, I'm not sure, you might have to narrow it.
Not just the school, right?
Right, no, it's
points here. One is spousal privilege. Well, it needs to be addressed somewhere. I would suggest it doesn't apply in child abuse cases.
I agree.
And the other one, I think a parent should be required to report suspected abuse at the hands of another parent. Paramour, spouse, former spouse.
I thought we like put in a provision in endangerment or something, if like you, that's, I guess we're a little bit different, but remember we were talking about like having a household member who doesn't, we do have that, but we don't make them mandated reporters.
Yeah, this is a separate,
I'm suggesting that they should be required. Because they're the ones there that most readily could help protect that child.
and as a practical matter, what it's doing, although it may be tough to prosecute in a lot of cases, it creates a potential charge against the non-offending spouse in
Then you
many
have
cases.
Okay, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate, which is, I'm gonna pretend that I'm a domestic violence advocate and talk about this woman who's fearful for her life and for her child's safety and is doing everything that she thinks she can do to protect the child. And that, you're gonna hear back from women's advocates about making a spouse a mandated reporter. I think that I have to take some time and think about that.
I will say,
I mean, they can already be indicated for failing to protect.
And we also put in an endangerment provision, if you're a household member and you don't report, like you said, you can be charged with endangering the welfare of the child. We added that, I like that. So I don't know that I would mandate that,
Because then that would kick in the training and everything else. So there again, is that feasible? Can you train? If we say spouses, then how are you going to do, how would you,
when you go for your wedding life.
how would you do that? I guess that's what my concern is.
In the
When does
hospital,
that
when you give birth,
Huh?
in the hospital, when you give birth, because you're there for
Well,
so
we do a
long.
lot of.
Maybe so much time in your
What's that?
If they're already married to this person, and this person's abusing them,
Right.
so
How can you report?
how can she report? She's in danger, she's threatened, her life is threatened the whole time.
well,
What I'm looking to protect the one that's not being threatened.
The
The
child is
spouse
being
that's in the
threatened
home,
every time.
that sees it happening all the time, and lets it go
It's
on.
not that simple.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm not
Well,
looking to
you're-
carve out exceptions, but I'm looking.
you're absolutely right, it's not that simple.
I worked for units before for domestic violence. It's not that simple.
On the other hand,
Everybody's so dying. It's just not that simple.
on the other hand,
You don't take them in.
the kid, well, let's put it this way, look at it this way. We're creating, if we do this, if we include the spouse, in some cases where we can prove it, we're creating a potential criminal penalty for the spouse. Realistically, if a woman gets on the stand and says, right, demonstrates that she was substantially abused, is anybody going to convict her? Probably not. But even assuming that they do, I'll tell you, these are difficult issues to balance, and I understand economic dependency. I've also seen enough child abuse cases where mama makes a choice. And this is not necessarily the destitute people, but there's no question that I've seen people where mama makes a choice. I got a nice car to drive, I got a decent apartment to live in, a hell of a lot better than I was doing before, and yet, my little kid is getting sexually used by the guy who's paying that ticket. And you know what? Life's hard. Life's hard, and she's taking her lumps, but I'm getting mine. So, there are a lot of ways to slice that, and if we're making policy distinctions, we're here to protect kids. And mom made a choice. We won't get into, abortion and having the kid, but she is responsible for that child. And we're making a sexist assumption, it could just as well be father. That choices may be hard, and she's got unsatisfactory choices, she can always leave.
But, I'm just saying that, yes, they always leave, but they don't leave. I'm saying that if the mother is frightened to death and been beaten, these women have suffered tremendously, and they are very frightened of the male, and scared to even leave their household. I've seen some really bad cases. And so, she does call, and she does tell, and she does die. I mean, I'm just saying, whatever you do, it's a plan. I mean, it has to be a plan for safety of everyone.
They prosecute, in York County, they prosecute people all the time for failure to protect, right? I mean, I see it lots of times.
For failure to protect the
Protect the
child
child,
based
right?
on, sure.
Whether you're a mandated reporter or not, I see cases all the time where the mother is brought
They should be.
up on charges. So we have a criminal response to that, correct?
Yeah.
What's
And I don't know about mandating a household member as a mandated reporter, like, gets you at the end of the day anywhere different. Like, because a mother is thinks that she's a mandated reporter, then you're going back almost, Jason, again, to almost everybody being a mandated reporter. Because if you're a parent and you're a mandated reporter, like, I can't imagine you're gonna report thinking, oh, I'm a mandated reporter, so I'm gonna now report. You're either gonna report it or you're not gonna report it based on all those other things. And there are consequences if you don't protect your child that are already established, and we're expanding them. So, I think of mandated reporters as being professionals and being adults who work like in an authoritative position with children as being our sentinels for protecting children from their parents in part. And so, again, it just brings it back to making everybody a mandated reporter.
Well, it goes back to what I've been saying since day one, which I'm gonna be the preventionist here, and that's what we keep wanting. We have all these knee-jerk laws written, and we're not putting any money, time, energy into prevention, primary prevention. Let's put some of this in up front. That's where it's got to come, is that education, so that those mothers feel safe then when they do report. So that's the whole thing about putting the systems in place, and everybody, Jason, feels a responsibility to protect children. You can't mandate it though. We all have to be, that's this whole education piece about everybody, informing everybody about their responsibility to protect children. We all have a responsibility. Everybody walks down the street. And we have, it's right, a whole village to raise a child. And we're not spending any time, money, or energy into doing those kinds of projects. And I'm talking about in those, high-risk communities, sitting down with those mothers, the nurse-family partnerships, and nurse-family partnership, those kinds of programs that stop it from ever happening. That's where we got to
I can't agree with you more. I applaud you for articulating that way. But I will take issue with the fact that you say we can't mandate everybody, because there are other states that have, and
it doesn't work. You ask every state that we've done research on that. We started our organization. It doesn't work. Every coalition that I've talked to and have that, they said it doesn't work.
Is there data to show it causes more harm?
Right, it's words.
It's work.
And if we want to go that way and put it in words, I don't think we'd harm anything, truthfully. I mean, but it is words. You have to understand, it's not about protecting kids. Because I remember a case in York not long ago where a child was murdered, and everybody in the neighborhood knew there was a problem. And nobody, they didn't know, they knew something was wrong, they didn't know what, they didn't rise to the level suspecting abuse, but they did know. And there was a minister, and the entire neighborhood. And we learned after the fact, the entire neighborhood came forward and said, and all the relatives know. So if all those people were mandated reporters, would it have made a difference? No, because it wouldn't have, because they didn't, to them, maybe it did happen, maybe something's happening, maybe something's not happening.
Well,
I don't know, so they just.
Except that there would be, if we linked mandated reporter training, and that's why I'm just trying to see if there's a way to spin this around.
These were people that would never have been trained, and that's right. If we could do that, I agree with you. If there was a way to link it and can, but
I mean,
What
it's
was
not-
that?
it's the
Happened
same
in
problem
Broadway.
that we have in prosecuting these cases.
exactly.
Everybody's outraged by the behavior, but when you put 12 people on a jury, they want more than proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
They
If
do.
it's just the child's word and there's no physical evidence against the perpetrator,
Right.
and the defendant doesn't give an explanation and he doesn't testify, I've had so many jurors say, well, you know, we believed her, but we just didn't have enough.
Yeah.
But I guess it
So
goes back to
it's
prevention.
denial of people in that neighborhood. It was those people in denial about what they were seeing, not wanting to believe that anybody could.
Or maybe, or maybe
Yeah.
thinking somebody else was reporting.
No, or that we
Or-
didn't have the
yeah.
culture. that
Somebody
we
else
were
with
reporting.
responsibility
think-
was reporting it.
Yeah, actually, we had a community forum and most of them came forward, and they knew something wasn't right, they never suspected, they did, but they didn't. The exact same thing you're talking about, the same dynamics. Do I think something's wrong here? Do I wonder? Yes, but do I think it's suspected abuse?
That's what I
They
think
couldn't
goes
say
back to
that.
what Delilah said.
And they're not trained, and they don't know anything, that's why Mandy reports
But
link
one of-
to training.
But one of our things about this task force is not just about mandated reporters. One of our things, and we've heard this with the Family Nurse Partnership, is one of our things is we have to have people perceive child abuse differently. And Sandusky has done that for us in a tremendous way, has assisted us with changing how people view kids in their community, kids that they have contact with, people who they would otherwise not want to believe are abusers. Now they're looking at differently and they're thinking, well, geez, just because he's in a position of power doesn't mean he's not potentially a pedophile. So that, to the extent that that case has done anything good, it hopefully has changed people's ideas of who child molesters are. But I do agree that we have a responsibility to really be upping the ante on getting the word out about these things that do work. But I think today, our goal is just limited to this one aspect. So I just want to reassure you that I feel the way you do about prevention, but I think we're starting with the nuts and bolts of the CPS law, which is a little frustrating for people in law enforcement too, because I keep saying from the very beginning, child abuse isn't defined by the CPS law. Child abuse can be any number of things in the criminal realm. Endangering the welfare of a child isn't called child abuse, but it is child abuse.
Right.
You know, and so getting people to realize that just because it's not defined statutorily as child abuse doesn't mean it's not, is also an obstacle. But today, our focus is just on CPS law, and that's where I'm trying to stay focused too. But I want you to know that I think there are people here who agree with you, that, and there has been testimony about prevention programs that do work, that are evidence-based, that can make a difference in communities. And I think one of our recommendations needs to be to say those things. I mean, in addition to changing CPS, which we have been over-focused on, we need to be supporting law enforcement, and there's ways that we can do that, and hopefully we're going to address that at some point in our work sessions in the future. There's ways that we can really talk about prevention programs that work, and then there's ways that we can fix the CPS law.
I agree, and that part of it is what I was trying to say, is there's some things you can't fix in this law, and that comes back to the community education and responsibility.
It all comes
We
back
can't
to
fix
it.
it all in this law.
Right.
I honestly think that at some point, if you mandate that everybody is a mandated reporter, I think it's like, who's,
Well, we
We
just
only
lost,
concept-
well, what we just lost is the audience for negative.
But don't we become a sham task force? If our only recommendation is, let's just make everybody a mandated reporter, why did we spend 8 months doing testimony?
Right.
Oh, well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
We've got to only do one thing,
Yeah.
one thing at a time. I hope we're not losing you indefinitely.
No.
Okay.
We have something else going. I just wanted to thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Hey, I hope you'll be
Please
back
come
the 20th and 21st.
Yeah,
Yeah, please come back.
I'm gonna be in San Diego, but I'll be there.
You're the bon vivant, they got you bouncing all over the place.
Well, it's, yeah.
Or is that a trip, or is that a vacation?
Good for somebody.
Ah.
By all means.
It's work.
And you're going to get us that written
Yeah,
testimony.
I'll have that for you, and then Jackie and I are gonna talk about some of the stuff for law enforcement, throw our heads together here and see if there's stuff that we're missing. But thank you all.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you.
No, I mean, Delisle, I think why don't we take a poll right now? I think prevention and love to see you've listed some specific programs which you've shared with us. If there's a specific way other than just the governor better come up with $83 million to do this, that we can frame this, kind of like I suggested to the trooper, you know, endowment for some particular purpose, something if there are concepts. To me, the number one concept that I've seen so far that I think we need to push the CACs. But if there's anything in particular other than just the world needs more money, I think we're all in favor of it.
Well, and let me just say something about the CACs. They're forensic piece. CAC's role is not to do prevention.
True. Oh,
That's another
absolutely.
one. So, yeah, I just want to say, I hear what you're saying about CACs, but they're not preventionists.
Hey, there is no question that you're dealing with, to a fair degree, law enforcement people.
Right.
I've always been the negative debate team. I want somebody to do something bad, and then I will do my best to crush them. I'm not much optimistic about improving human nature, to tell you the truth. But I will certainly vote to support your efforts to do it and, you know, keep flogging away. But you know, we've got to focus on kind of what there is, especially that is in debate and that we need to come to consensus on.
I agree with Jackie about the mandated reporters insofar as it's important that we spend some time on the law, but I think the bottom line is we don't have a culture now where mandated reporters feel like they're reporting results in children being helped or protected. And so I think that while it's important to hash these issues out, it's not really fair in a way to start penalizing and doing this because our system isn't in order yet, right? People call Childline, and the fact is sometimes things don't happen. And people sometimes make reports and children aren't protected. So I think when we start penalizing people, all these different people in all these contexts for not doing, it's like it's at the wrong time. We can do a certain amount, we can spend that, but the real issue is how the system is working to protect kids. And so I guess I fear if we spend too much time on the nitty-gritty of the legislation, the real problem is if we had the right culture, people would call because they see that it protects children, right? If all those people in New York really trusted their CPS agency to help children, they probably would have picked up the call. But probably some of them had seen, you know, CYF didn't do anything.
They brought that up.
Right, exactly. So, right, it's a culture.
They did
If
say
you can
that.
mandate it, and if you have the right culture,
Well,
then people report, because it's the right thing to do, and they think they're helping.
well, we're not going to have universal reporting mandate. What else? Moving on.
That's Jim on
I don't know where we are with the volunteers, but
But I had a question.
I think it seems to me that bringing volunteers in terms of the expectation that training is going to be provided for mandated reporters, it gets to be very difficult, it seems to me, in terms of which volunteers and how far do you expand it. So I worry very much
You can't
about
just
that.
But I think most people, or most institutions that have volunteers already have some sort of training program for their volunteers.
Except, like, for example, my husband's on the board of the YMCA. So he's on a board of a YMCA where there are lots of kids running in and out, hundreds of them every day. But he's not directly involved with children, but he volunteers. So is he, does he need to go through mandated report? The YMCA is gonna come, all the YMCA's in Pennsylvania are gonna say, whoa, look at that. You know, like, what are we
But
doing all of our
hasn't he already had some kind, I'm just assuming,
Uh-uh.
because okay, well, maybe the Boy Scouts,
Sports
because of their
coaches,
unique,
volunteers, nothing.
I thought though that we were gonna work on that language about how we connect up the person to actually raise their responsibility. I didn't think it was just gonna be a blanket, just because you're in this role, you're automatically mandated reporter. I thought we were talking, well, maybe I missed it. I thought we were talking about doing something with the language you have in connection with the child, and I thought you were going to,
Play with that, yeah.
yeah, but still,
you're still
you're
having.
going to, you're going to have
You
their
have to
own.
have a connection between the volunteers and the kids. Yeah,
But
that's
there
my
are a
thing.
world of coaches out there. I mean, that's the most basic thing you have. No matter how much superstructure you have and how complicated the league is, you've got people out there teaching kids how to play second base, and either they're in or they're out.
Well, but then you have, because this happens in our little league all the time, is you may have a designated volunteer coach and 2 designated assistant coaches, but 3 or 4 other dads are out there in the field and they're helping out and they're not on anybody's roster and they don't have any clearances. They just pitched in, or the coach can't be there, so this dad steps up and takes over. This night, he's not had a clearance, he's not been registered with anybody. Technically, he shouldn't do it, But do they do it? Yeah, because they want to play the game.
Well, let's do this. Let's do this in the interest of moving ahead. Draft it and make it clear with a note that that's what's being drafted. Hopefully, the 20th and the 21st, we get, I think we have a quorum today, but that we get darn near everybody here, or we defer it ultimately to the adoption. I mean, that's an issue ongoing. I've kind of got thoughts on both sides of it, and we'll see.
So the 28th and 21st, I'm sorry I missed this.
Oh,
But
I'm sorry.
We're definitely taking testimony, and then we're having a work session similar to what we did in July.
We hope to. Now, one of the problems is money may be running short for us to, unless we all camp on the putting green below Mary's house, which may be a possibility. But,
That's a six-man tent.
oh, there you go, there you go. One for the girls and one for the boys, and we're all set. Seriously, that was I expressed the desire. I want us to get as far forward as we can. Yvonne, with the leg up we've got now, we should have pretty much everything drafted. So hopefully, we're doing the toughest stuff first. We reach closure, and by the 21st, we can kind of boot a lot of this out the door.
The expense part of it is associated with the overnight accommodations. And I'm assuming staff are driving here anyway, right? So really, it's for the task force members that are being asked to spend the night.
Well, when you think about the mileage, I suspect it'll work out, but
I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I would be willing to pay my own hotel room to spend the night if it meant that we could be productive and have a work session the following day. I don't know if that's.
I thought you were going to offer up your county to pay for everything.
well, hopefully.
I mean, I'm just thinking that if that's the obstacle, for those of us that have to travel,
I agree with you.
I think that I'm sure a lot of people would be able to not have to spend the night, but then.
We're gonna do 2 days in a row.
I'm sorry?
Spend the night. I'd rather stay the night if I have to do 2 days in a row.
Oh, that's it. Well, I think those are the last 2 days we get in a row, and I really would like to get us as far forward as we can. I mean, that'll be towards the end of September.
And then we have a birthday party for me. My birthday's that weekend.
There you go. There you go. So presumably that's what we're going to do. The second day will be
On that day?
devoted to.
Now, mine's the 23rd.
21, 22, 27.
20 and 21.
24, like session on Monday that we have.
Last week, Vicki has session.
I mean,
Fridays.
if we wanted to do anything in the fall, the legislature comes in the 24th. There's a vehicle in Senator Ward's committee on 3rd. So our intention was, you guys came to some consensus maybe on mandatory reporting, on who mandatory reporters are, increasing the penalties and including like the college people. So address Sandusky, that we could load that on the 24th. So I'm just worried that
I was
Well-
thinking we weren't gonna piecemeal our recommendations. I mean, I don't know about, like, practically speaking, what that means for the legislature. I don't have a clue what that means, but I was hopeful that we were gonna present a package with our complete recommendation in it.
Well, I think this is the only piecemeal that is feasible because it's the only thing that's in a position to go anywhere. We'll have plenty to put in the package. The concern, I guess, is I don't think we necessarily even want to get into all of the mandated reporter issues. If we can pull the college, and I think, given the realities of everything, including us looking productive, not that, substance is more important than appearance, but if the legislature is anxious to do something, we all agree on the college part of this, that we want colleges, employees of colleges, contractors with colleges, everything that Yvonne already has drafted to be mandated reporters. If get that piece of it, which that part we agree on, just, notwithstanding some of these other loose ends. Was there anything else in
How
that?
about the school employee piece?
Well, then,
Yeah, I mean, we
you
can,
wanted to get
Changing that
the,
to, I thought that was one that we really were very consistent with.
both getting rid of the school
The differences in.
and then that sort of defensive language or whatever.
I-
If we could
I
do,
think everybody was talking about it'd be nice to have a couple quick wins, and then really work on the packet. So things like making all the school people, all the reports come the same. And we had carved them out, carving them back in, and they were treated the same. That's a good quick win. And then if we could do
Do
at
we
least.
think we're gonna get opposition on that?
The chain of command part.
Yeah, that's what I'm,
well, we haven't heard that.
I'm not so sure. that's
Right,
a quick
we haven't
win.
heard that, so
I had
maybe.
a preliminary
Oh, you have?
discussion with PSEA, that they said that they would be willing, they don't want to stretch something out to next
Yeah, I
session
know, but
because
then
they're
it's
afraid
also-
it would be
that's
worse
the
than
thing.
what they would get
We
if they
haven't
could
heard
do
that.
something
I haven't heard.
quickly
Yeah.
now. I mean, I haven't shared language because it wasn't my place to do that, but I think that they would be receptive in, like, kind of doing it now because they're afraid of what they're going to end up getting.
We could circulate the school, well, if we can get consensus on this chain of command stuff on the colleges and agreement on the school employees, we could circulate that and give everybody a deadline to respond. And if you basically had consensus on that, then we could have that done and approved before the 20th.
or certainly on the 20th.
Right, that you would have it then.
24, right?
Well, we have to have things drafted and sent out to members.
But the thing is, I mean, we would have it drafted in legislative reference bill form. And unless we really screwed up, they shouldn't do much of anything to it. They would send it right in.
Well,
So what are we
as to,
talking about?
well, the issue that got raised first was, could we move this to Wednesday and Thursday? And I guess the concern that I have is, Heather, I don't know exactly what the computer program did in selecting these days, but we have some of the members here, other members not here. I don't know whether we have our books. I'm really loath to be trying to shift gears to that extent. I'd sooner, if we, at least everybody who is here, we thrash this through. If we've got a general consensus, I don't think the things we're having difficulty with relate to this aspect. I would sooner, as you say, provisionally, if people are willing to vote to support it, with the caveat that they're going to get a final draft and can respond to somebody.
One thing we could maybe try to do, and this is something John had brought up to me about doing a webinar, like if we have maybe a couple of hours that we could fit people to do it as a webinar, but
It's more effective than teleconference, because then you can at least see the people.
I don't like any of that. Let's avoid it.
Technology,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but what's the problem? Now, but the problem is, we don't know what people's schedules are.
Right.
It's it does save the traveling, but if, Becky's scheduled for trial, if I've got something I've committed to do, if
But at
the
least
judge
it's
is
out
on
there
the
in the
bench.
air.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's keep, yes, sir.
Because I had the managed to track Judge Grimm down last night, and I feel I must share, I know he expressed concern about piecemeal recommendations or the concept of an interim report without having concepts agreed to and knowing where the whole package was. So I feel the need to share that because I'm confident he would express something like that were he been able to be here today. So.
Well, do you think he has particular problems with these?
Well, I don't know. I think he's concerned about what happens to the full report if in part, if the legislature takes action in a piecemeal way, and how then the full report and given the complexity and the attention to the issues, and if the expectation is for an interim report that these legislative actions are based on, how does that get done unless the group has considered that probably wouldn't have said exactly that, but I know since he did express
Well,
that concern.
I'm not, I don't think we have one of the, invest the time or the effort in doing an interim report. If there are fairly narrow issues, which particularly are directly responsive to Penn State, that, I mean, again, it's kind of like everybody's free to say whatever they want. The senator's free to run the legislation if, in fact, we all agree with the particular provisions of the legislation. I don't know whether my saying so in a letter or simply staff so advising her is, doesn't strike. I don't think we're going to have a shortage. If you look down the laundry list of things from starting with prevention, we put that right at the top. I don't think we're going to have a shortage of things to talk about at a press conference in October and November. In fact, to the contrary, I think we'll have to do this in a way that we don't lose everybody's attention and get all of the points. Jason?
And I echo what Jim has indicated, and I want to make sure my position is clear that I think Senator Ward's a champion, and I support what she does on all this. I truly would like to try to support her. However, my concern is the axiom of unintended consequences, and that is, if we come out and take any kind of position on this, I think there are a lot of legislative members that have pending legislation that's been held in abeyance, and they will push very hard to try to have that logjam come loose prior to the end of the session, especially since there's a big election coming up in a couple months. So I have concerns about taking any position, quasi or in fact interim report, because of that.
Okay, duly noted. Let's at least figure out what our position is. Keep moving.
Okay, just a quick little plug on the final report. Every report we've ever written has had policy recommendations and statutory recommendations, and they're of equal weight. However, policy recommendations are easier to write. So we end up spending a lot of time on the statutory recommendations, even if they may ultimately not have as much weight as some of the policy ones, but it takes a lot longer to do the legislation. So the policy stuff is not really getting a backseat or anything like that. It's just, this is the stuff that takes forever. So having said that, on page 4, at the bottom of the page, we start with paragraph C, staff members of institutions. And this is hopefully designed to address the whole Penn State situation with the chain of command, with who reports to who when you're in an institution, and a staff person witnesses abuse and then reports it. Because under the current law, as we probably all know by now, the employee is to report to the administrator, and then the administrator is the person who's supposed to file the report with children and youth. And somewhere along the line in Penn State, that line of communication got warped at least, if not completely broken. And so what we've tried to do here is make it a dual reporting requirement. The person who witnesses it reports to Childline or the local police immediately, and then immediately informs the person in charge of the institution, who has the obligation to make sure the report was made and to make sure all follow-up was done. And it prohibits them from in any way trying to revise the report, change the report, convince the person not to file the report, or whatever. So this is really probably the most Sandusky-motivated piece you're going to see so far.
Why don't we just have them notify Childline, why don't we give them an option of the police also? Because then we're again going back to, just make it simple, one thing. Like, then you don't have to know, oh, we thought we had to report to this person, no, we didn't know we report to, just like, report to Childline.
I just get concerned about that for the reasons I've already stated, until we are certain that that capacity is there to handle those calls and that referrals are going to be made immediately. If, for instance, let's take the Sandusky situation, that janitor witnessed the child being sexually molested. Had he left there immediately he had made a call to the police department, there might have been an immediate response by the police department while the child is still in the premises, that child would have been identified. But if you call Childline and Childline sends a fax or whatever to a local police department, after they figure out which local police department it is, or they send it to Pennsylvania State Police, and Pennsylvania State Police say, well,
the
that's not a
DA is
jurisdiction, or the DA's office is just closed. I mean, I get concerned about us creating this perception that Childline is a first responder. They are not a first responder. And that's, I mean, the idea of a one-call system is terrific, but I think it's gonna confuse people. It took us years to get people to call
So
911.
why don't we just say, how about this? Because this is, whenever a person is required to report under subsection B, I don't know exactly what subsection B is, but okay.
That's the mandated reporters.
Fine, if you're a mandated reporter, then you must immediately report to Childline. And then we can add, or after another quick sentence that says, if you witness a crime being committed, call 911, call the police. But just that, but it doesn't, like, because a lot of mandated reporting, Jackie, they don't, it's very unusual if somebody walks in a school
Right.
on sexual abuse occurring. So it's, we're making laws now, like, for kind of rarities.
Yes.
So you could add something is, like, if you are witnessing a crime,
There are no exigencies.
what?
There's no immediate danger that you would require 911 services. You don't need police to
Right,
roll up on the scene with guns.
very uncommon.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So you say, so you can just add something like, if you witness a crime, if you are witnessing a crime, call the
And if
police.
someone called us and told us, I just saw this, we would actually tell them to call 911. We
Well, why don't we
direct them
just
to
do-
call 911.
You presently have that duty in the MOU between the school district and the local police department in terms of what the duties are for everybody in that building when a crime occurs in the building. So why don't we do a cross-reference to the duties? Why don't we take a look at that language? That work potentially?
Yeah, I
To
mean.
clarify that there is a duty, in schools, there absolutely is a duty to call law enforcement when a crime occurs.
Or
There's-
just
there-
say-
goes beyond-
There is now.
The breach.
There is now.
That's what I'm saying, so if we might be able to cross-reference that or to take language out of that mandatory reporting requirement.
I mean, we could,
To make clear that you're right, this isn't the only response, it's not a child line call.
we could
There's a
require that
separate
they make
duty.
2 calls.
That, I'll tell you, I'm
You don't want
liking
your-
that better. Especially if, are we ready to, if we wrote this into this and it got Jet Assist and actually got passed, we said that you can complete a report by email, the initial report, the phone call,
We
Just-
could,
you
we would
could
have
deal
to,
with it?
yeah, we could email it, that wouldn't be a problem.
okay?
Just having the electronic transmission between systems. Email wouldn't be a problem, email would be great for us because then, we would not have to make a phone call. The only thing is we would have to change the section of the law that requires us to do a verbal notification to counties if we're talking about emailing counties.
Well, I'm just
It
thinking,
just tells us now that we immediately call immediately.
if we're going that way anyway, it's just a question of you're having to draft it sooner rather than later. And if we say you notify both Childline and the local police,
When do you do that? Because remember, we just got done like 3 hours ago saying, let's just call Childline, we
Well,
keep things simple.
but we have to recognize other statutes which place duties on certain professionals to make a dual report. We have to take a look at the Title 18 section
I
that
did
deals with
that.
medical professionals.
Right.
We have to take a look at the MOUs, which deals with school professionals in terms of, not professionals, everybody in the school building, with regard to when they have to. So I don't think we can answer these questions yet until we do that other research and set out where there's other mandatory reports to law enforcement. And we might just be able to cross-reference those. We might still have a gap, but I think we need to answer those questions.
but isn't the MOU with regard to school, oh, you're saying,
Schools have to report to police when crimes occur.
well, we're repealing those sections, right?
No, this is a separate law.
It's a separate.
That's a separate statute.
It is?
Safe Schools Act?
Yep. Yeah, you're not saying
I'm not
what
saying
they
child
report.
abuse, I'm
Oh,
saying
okay,
crimes.
all right.
That's
Oh,
what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not,
crimes.
Okay, I'm
And just
sorry.
for the record, in
Sorry.
Title 18, 5106, that requires a physician, intern, or resident, or any person conducting, managing, or in charge of any hospital own act or by the act of another, which caused death or serious bodily injury or inflicted by means of a deadly weapon as defined under 2301. And then there's another section too, or upon whom injuries have been inflicted in violation of any penal law of the Commonwealth.
Well,
And I think that's why they're being
Any
told.
That's
That's
going
going
to
to
be
be the point.
Right.
Yeah.
Any penal, so if there's any
But
law
any
that.
injury inflicted by the act of another, which would cause death or serious bodily injury, is potentially reportable too, so.
Well, you have
It
that,
doesn't just have to be a deadly weapon.
you have the dual reporting to the doctors, you have the dual reporting to the school employees, but there are other
Right.
institutions.
Right.
And what do you do with that?
So I think this needs more work.
Yeah. What do other states do? I guess, go back to that question, because I'm sure other states have penal codes also, and I don't think people definitely report.
Yeah, we don't wanna, we're tired of like not knowing, we just wanna report to one place and know that our reports.
There are states that require dual reporting.
But there are some that don't.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, how do they word it so that you can kill two birds with one stone, so to speak?
Can I ask a question?
sure.
What are the concerns we're addressing? One is that we don't entrust the system of one reporting to be prepared or adequate, I guess Jackie's what. I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to resolve.
Well, there are a couple of issues. Child line, even if it's just a short amount of time, you're creating a whisper down the lane effect.
Right.
And we know, at least at times, child line has gotten overloaded, even if normally they're chugging along. And the concern, and I forget whether you may have been before you got here this morning, but certainly in some cases, evidence is going to be evanescent, and if you don't get the police right out there to scarf it up and to, put somebody on the house to make sure that the paramour doesn't come back to execute a search warrant, whatever, the more time you lose, the more likelihood it is that he gets rid of the clothes with the semen stains, or gets rid of the belt, or what, the physical evidence you need. So, certainly we're making it less likely that we'd have anything by the 24th, but you guys are going to look into those issues. I'm thinking that particularly if at the same time we can make it easier, I mean, sending an email, even for a troglodyte like myself with fat fingers and an iPhone, isn't that tough? And I suspect that from the standpoint of satisfying the minimum requirement that keeps you from getting prosecuted, you probably don't even have to complete the whatever it is, all the stuff in the 47 form to cover yourself that way. So that I'm thinking if we put the requirement that it's both the police and child line, this is the kind of thing that, 5 years from now, we hope there's a 911 and all kinds of nifty stuff that is basically like calling 911 in a modern, well-developed community. But I don't know that we're there. And some of the other issues that arise are child line's not going to know, in a lot of cases, what municipality should even be starting out with this. I think before you got here, we addressed the issue of, in a lot of cases, they're not going to know where the event happened, if it was particularly a one-time kind of
Mandated
event.
reporters in hospitals and doctor's offices don't know that there's a mandate to call child line and a mandate to call the police for child abuse. And honestly, it's hard enough to just get them to call one number to file their reports. I mean, like we've been saying all along, that we want this system to be as simple as possible for the users. The users are your mandated reporters, and for them to have to know, okay, for this one I call child line, for this one I call child line.
No, wait. This is everything. You're right. We're getting rid of the whole dichotomy with the schools is gone. So we're talking about every mandated reporter for every child abuse. There is one mandated, or maybe two mandated actions that go together, but that's it.
What are they?
Call the police and call child line.
She's saying she doesn't want to have.
Well, and I'm saying life's a bitch.
Wait, is there something, would there be something wrong or illegal about having a single representative from law enforcement work at child line? So that you can take care
From state?
Or a number of people, no, I'm saying a certain number of people at Childline are from law enforcement, and the calls get screened by both at the same time, and then
No, it
there's
doesn't.
no, you can't do
This
that.
state's just too diverse.
Yeah.
State's just way, way too diverse. By volume, you guys represent, Philly and Pittsburgh have to represent an enormous overall part of the volume of kids who are getting abused. Your systems are vastly different even from what mine would be in neighboring Bucks County, let alone, I mean, the trooper, and it's neat to have him here, he's talking about a reality up on the New Jersey border with Pennsylvania, up north, the Delaware River, that's just wildly different from what it would be in my county.
I'm gonna give you a different argument. And
Okay.
the argument, this minute's argument is, it's much easier to tell all of your state's mandated reporters to call in a number to report suspected abuse, and train 30 or 50, I don't know how many people work at Childline, train those people to figure out how to get them to police and to child welfare, than to try to train every mandated reporter in Pennsylvania to know that they have to call 2 different numbers every time they're trying to report child abuse.
There's some on the way.
It's not even 2 numbers, I can't figure out the municipality either. I'm no better at it than, so every individual mandated reporter can't figure out what police precinct it is either. Right, but I agree with Cindy, you've got 50 people, and they figure it out.
I agree with the concept that Dave's talking about, and actually, I think maybe originally I suggested it should be a dual report, but I think it needs, I agree with what you're saying, it should be one stop, 911, you've sold me, I can't say how much I support that, but then we should say, Childline shall.
I thought we had agreed on that. Call one number, and then when it comes into Childline, work with Childline to figure out where it goes.
I don't know if you all ever voted on it. I'll do whatever you want. We'll figure
I
it
love
out.
that.
I think
I don't know if you all
conceptually, it is a
voted.
phenomenal idea. I think in practical terms, law enforcement is gonna be shortchanged if that's the model we go with under the current situation.
Under
Because
current
I can't sit here as a member of law enforcement community and say after we've heard testimony about calls being dropped from Childline and workload issues and phones not being answered, that law enforcement is gonna have any sense of real confidence in a system that is gonna be directing all the calls to Childline. But I understand they're in the process of upgrading.
Right now, what's happening,
Well, you see, that's
But you're asking
that's
me to-
one of the,
Yeah.
if I may, one of the difficulties is, we're now, and Vicky's request has put this in a little bit different light. We're now drafting something that Senator Ward may actually try and move right now. Absolutely. I'll sign anything that says in 2 years, 3 years, whenever Childline is up to speed, I support 911, if that's doable, in the one, the one location. Once the administration in tight years and everything else has had a chance to put the resources into Childline that are needed to have that system. But we can't wave our legislative wand and say, poof, there it is. And in the meantime, the concern is that stuff is going to get lost at Childline, or at the very least, it will be delayed in some cases where really, well, let me ask you, you have a kid comes into the hospital, ambulance brings him in, or better yet, father brings him in, babe in arms, bleeding copiously out the ears, and says, my wife just beat the crap out of this kid, and she ran off somewhere. She's out looking for meth or something. Who are you going to call other than Ghostbusters?
No, that case we call them. But that's the exception, not the rule.
Okay.
Or in most of those cases, 911 was called, and the police are
Yes.
there like immediately.
Yeah.
Because they go
Right,
through
because
that.
the kid collapses at home, and then somebody calls 911 and they fix it work. So the police are already involved. So your mandated reporters don't really call the police, because they just know that this looks like child abuse, they have to call Childline. So.
I share the concern that the system's not there. The big thing we should be, our model recommendation should be, this is the optimal situation that we want to suggest that should be passed legislatively. And the system is gonna have to adapt to all the various things we're doing, including implementing a 711 system with Childline and training those people and delegating it to the municipalities and the county child welfare agencies. I thought we cohesively agreed that is ideally the best system we can come up with, foregoing the known errors that we have and problems that we have with Childline being uneducated, dropping calls and all those things that are being addressed.
I don't think I ever consented to that because I always thought that we were sending an inconsistent message to people. Okay, well, because the example voters came back, well, if it was something like that, people would never call 911. No, if we have a PSA that is saying, call 711, call 711, if it involves a kid, you're going to have people call 711, and there's going to be a child that is not gotten to the proper attention of law enforcement authorities or medical attention or whatever because they made that call to 711, and they said, well, that's what I heard to do on TV, that's what the billboard said to do, I didn't know 911 too. I mean, I'm not so sure that we can throw all of our eggs in that basket. I mean, I think it's a great idea, but you're talking about telling the public, call this number, and everything good's going to happen when you call this number.
Talking about mandated reporters, not the public, right?
No, I think everybody was saying.
Everybody?
Yeah, everybody was saying. I mean, at least that's how I understood it.
Let me just clarify
Yeah.
that. I think before we can do everybody, we gotta get the system fixed. So that is two different things. Let's talk about what we want mandated reporters to do. Later on, that's the prevention piece and everybody's got a call. We're not ready for that. And I think that's in one of our recommendations. We roll into that. Right now, though, I do think, I agree with you again, Jason.
God, I told you to be careful.
That we've got, one of the priorities is for whoever has to fix Childline is do it, because the resources there, we have to demand that, I think.
Oh,
In
yeah.
our report, this is number one priority. You've got to fix that system first, because we want X, Y, and Z. Then we do, now, prevention, we can start thinking about that, that's still my priority. But these are two different issues. And I think number one is get the system in place that has to respond. Because when I came on board, that's what it was about, fixing the system that has failed us. So if we can concentrate on that, then the messaging for everybody else comes later, right?
Well,
But,
hold
okay,
on.
Now, and let me just say this, there is money there. I don't care what anybody says.
I wasn't gonna
there's
talk about the
there
money.
to fix this. If we,
I was gonna mention money.
if we demand it and the public demands it, then our legislature has to find the money in the budget to fix a system that is broken.
I'm not talking about money.
Watch out, I'm agreeing with you now.
And so do I. I want to go back to Jackie's point because she does make a good point. I just want to point out several years ago, when I was in the General Assembly, we passed legislation so that other reports that were non-family members could be called into Childline, and Childline would send them to law enforcement, which is what we do today. The way it works, that's what's happening today. The way it works, they take it, they write it up, and they send it to law enforcement in a packet, or whenever they get it,
By snail mail, right?
by snail mail, to the DA. I'm just gonna tell you, when I went back to York, I wanted to see what the law, what it was doing, and I asked the York DA, can I see, what are you doing with these reports? How many did you get? And I found out at that time they had like hundreds that had come in. And I said, really, what are you doing with them? They said, oh, here they are, there's a stack of them. I started going through them. There were cases where kids had reported that they were videotaping, there was videotapes. Things that I'm looking at thinking, there's evidence, and we're months down the road, and nobody has investigated. So we don't want to fall into the same trap. I'd like to call one place too, to be honest with you, but I don't know how we can do it unless people had common sense and picked up the phone, here's a situation, acute situation, I need the police. They don't treat child abuse like every other crime. It's unfortunate, they should. It should be investigated like every other crime as far as if there's something acute or a child's alleging videotaping, you gotta make a call right away. And that doesn't happen. And I would bet you, Dave, you went back to Bucks and said, let me take a look at these reports that have been coming from Childline. You're going to see cases in there where you're going to say to yourself, oh my God, an officer should have been out there already. And they probably weren't.
No.
So the way it works today, I don't believe works.
Okay? Well,
So I don't wanna fall into that
But
same
you
trap.
said that the issue is
Hold
not
on,
just
Ms.
child line,
Grandma.
it's also the.
It's not just child line.
Right.
Right, that's right.
It is not just child line, it is a total system issue of how they go.
I would say, you know, what I saw there might have been abusive, I'm gonna call the cops on this person. I'm afraid that whole piece is gonna be picked up. The slap,
Okay.
the slapping.
Chilling effect kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well,
Unless somebody,
let's do this. We need to move on, it seems to me. And we're sort of, I think we're sort of all talking at different sides of the same issue, and the question is reality. For now, let's draft this as child line. Have the state as a policy question, should 911 and/or the DA's office be included in that mandate? When we have everybody here, or at least everybody who comes next time, will make that determination in terms of if the senator is looking at running something, or that potential existing. Vicki, you're hearing all these policy questions. I don't know that we're in even as good a position as, ultimately, these are legislative questions. Takes your choice. I don't think we're gonna reach unanimity. We'll take the vote next time. But, there are questions on each side, and frankly, just speaking for myself, and I suspect Jackie, my vote now would be to, if it's gonna happen right now, that I wanna see 911 or somebody included, because the system isn't ready. If we're talking about strictly, this is a report that is a model for where things are going, and we make very clear that we're not content with where child line is now, but it needs these resources, then maybe the answer is different. So I'm suggesting we draft this as if we're going to render one report in November, and it's going to be for the 12th of never in terms of, I hope not, I should have said that, for the 12th of November next year, for the legislature to pass. But we'll acknowledge, the doctors win again, and, but if Senator Ward personally asked my opinion as to what she should do, if she thought she was going to get something passed in the next 6 months, it'd be keep 911 in there. So it's just, we're really talking about two different realities.
911 is not in the CPSL right now.
No.
We could.
But it is in what? Crimes.
Well,
Well, and it's a practical matter, we might be letting you guys off the hook if we just said 911. I assume almost everywhere has does everywhere in the
Yes.
state have 911?
Yeah.
Okay, so you get the state police barracks in wherever, if nothing else. That at least takes you off the hook from figuring out what district it is, what township it is, and 911 deals with that now. That's part of what they do. So, if that's an easy amendment, whether we need to even reach that, let's move on.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I have checked, researched out about the one number. 711 is not available, but 611 is, and I have the information how to petition the FCC. But that's the only number that's available.
She is good.
You're good. 711 is,
She's gonna start calling tomorrow.
people, it's for people with disabilities, like hearing impaired, it's a number that.
I did see that.
Yeah.
778 is the issue.
I will look at that tomorrow.
Okay, Yvonne has the floor.
One thing that we can consider as well as we're drafting and reviewing proposals is to put in language that says we want this one call system established, and once it's been certified or whatever, that it's in place, then you make the one call, and then you make sure you have the system ready to go, and you have.
I think that's a good idea, having systems in place, but I think we need to say what happens once we get that in place.
Right,
Yeah, but
exactly, that's what I'm saying. So it's almost like a
drafted in that.
springing kind of thing, it's like,
Yeah.
when this is done, then this is the way you're gonna handle
And if you don't have that in there, then it may never get done, because you're gonna have to, the General Assembly is gonna have to allocate some funding.
Well,
Can
yeah,
611
I mean,
trigger
that's a risk
911,
you take
like a child line?
any of
Let's-
them.
So that's fine.
Okay,
Okay,
Yeah,
um,
like a
the
forward.
next issue.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
No, I'm just kind of
Good
looking through
question.
this issue and it's building a little bit, I think, on what the kind of concept Gary suggested. But if we're talking about either a dual report to law enforcement and child line, or one or the other, as you drafted, I'm thinking of the institutional abuse allegations that come up. Child alleges they've been abused by, I'll use Glen Mills since you're here. So would that require your staff person then to contact law enforcement directly right now? When your staff person, in some of the cases I'm familiar with, the last thing they believe that it's even necessarily valid, but the abuse allegations nevertheless been made. So I think we do have to think a little bit about it, where we're requiring a mandated reporter to contact law enforcement in every.
I wasn't really, I appreciate that, I wasn't really coming from my frame of reference, but it was something more acute.
Well, I get
My
that,
next
but-
door neighbor, I don't want to call the cops on him.
Right, but
I want to let somebody know I think something's going on.
But it would also impact mandated reporters in residential programs as well, where a child alleges abuse.
But
Well-
if the staff employee doesn't believe it and there's nothing to prove it, don't you come back down to
Well, they
reasonable
have to call
cause to
child line
suspect?
now.
But they don't.
They don't.
Only
They have to
if
have
you have
reasonable
reasonable
cause to suspect. They don't have to call it the minute we didn't write the
There's a
minute
lot
an
of-
allegation is made, you have to report it. You still have to have reasonable cause.
What?
Yeah,
So-
because they put mom up to it.
Okay,
Well, and what I was gonna say is, it seems to me, and I haven't thought through where I'd be if I was standing in your shoes, I might wanna call the police right away. You want right away to document the fact, just as we want to document that there is evidence.
That's right.
You want to document that, I looked this kid all over and nary a bruise did I find.
On the other hand, every child abuse report we make, there is no position or hospital that thinks that every child abuse report we make should go to the police.
right.
Right.
And,
That is true.
and they
Shouldn't.
don't all go to
No,
the
they
police.
don't.
Now you're mandated that, that
That's the other
every
that's the other flip side.
child abuse report we make,
Right.
we have to pick up a phone and call.
Talk about resources.
Thank you, that's
That's not true, because in
Exactly what we
statute,
just said.
but in 5106, you're required if a child has an injury that's inflicted in violation of any law of the Commonwealth, you're required to report that anyway right now.
So that, could that be
People
like
are
some assault
making a
harassment?
distinction about child versus adult victims, but this doesn't distinguish. This just says any person who comes before you that's been injured as a result of a violation of the law, you're required to report to the police.
but it's honored in the breach, probably your emergency room
5106.
is patching up people who got maybe even their jaw broken in a minor way, or
So if you have
busted
a
toes.
child who has some loop marks from being hit with a belt, okay, and they've got some marks, and you want child line, you want children and youth to come and look at the kid, see what's going on, work with the family. Like, there's just no way that doctors think, okay, I need to call the police about this, nor do doctors think they should call the police about this.
Right, I think Jackie's pointed out a really important distinction, which is this language, unfortunately, written in 1973, applies to both adults and children. So I think it really would be helpful to look at the Safe Schools Act, which just last year enumerated the list of offenses, which if you have reason to believe they were committed, it's a mandatory report to law enforcement, offenses committed against children. So we might be able to fine tune this to limit physicians'
But
responsibility.
then remember, part of what we wanted to do with all of these laws is make life simple
I
for people.
understand.
The public needs to know, if I'm concerned about child abuse, I need to call this number. Whether it's 611 or Childline number, doctors mostly know that they're supposed to call Childline if they suspect child abuse. But now, like what you're recommending is that we add to the
No,
public,
I'm narrowing, no, it's
but you're adding 911, you're adding a police report to every Childline.
it's your existing duty.
That's,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that's,
yeah.
Mary is saying right now,
Right now,
It's already in
what
there.
Rachel does is what you're supposed to be doing.
And if there's loop marks on a child, my
Whereas in Philadelphia, unless the kid gets shot,
Right.
nobody's paying
I
attention.
can't function by that standard though, because the law says bodily injury, and bodily injury is defined as we talked about earlier. So if there's loop marks, that's not appropriate corporal punishment in my mind. And I would want that report to law enforcement so that we can evaluate, is that child being subjected to other abuse as well?
I'll
We're
tell you
not,
what,
this is such a philosophical
It
difference
is.
between
We're-
physicians and law enforcement. You're never gonna get over. This is the philosophical difference where we want the child to get help, and a lot of times we don't care about this part. I know you don't want to hear, but that's the fact. But we were saying, what if you had a system where you called 611? If you think it's a crime, you patch in 911. They listen to it, they're done. Everybody's been on the same call, you told them at exactly the same time, and if it doesn't meet a crime code, you don't get the call.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a perfect IT
Perfect
world, but
IT
wait a minute, we keep skipping over, and I forgot.
That was-
I want, right now, to make your world so much easier by authorizing email. There's no reason we can't do that right now so far as Childline's concerned. Is there a reason why that is troublesome from the standpoint of mandated, at least the medical mandated
There's
reports?
HIPAA information in it. That's the only issue is, if there's HIPAA information in that email, it can only go into your server. So if I get the Childline list from you guys, I have a special ID that I can only access it. In fact, I can't even mail it back without another password. So I can mail patient information out of the hospital, but if it's a patient that you don't know, it has to go through a secure server and you need a password. So the issue is just a logistical issue. Unless the patient's dead, there's a HIPAA issue.
Okay,
So that's,
but
I mean,
if
there are ways to
we
get over this,
authorize
but you
it,
have to.
we're, in legislation, we're not getting into what passwords you use and so
Right,
forth.
no, I'm just saying, there's a HIPAA issue with any Childline report, with an alive child. Right, the child's alive, there's a HIPAA issue with email. It doesn't exist.
With,
I thought
with
Childline
email and not verbal?
But not verbal, right.
Well,
I thought
That
Childline-
doesn't make any sense.
No, because I can't send information over the internet. Nobody's tapping into your phone line, but if I send a piece of patient information out of our hospital system without the word secure
I
colon,
don't think it's
I get an email
required, I
back.
don't think there's, if you're providing confidential information, verbal or written, I don't think there's a distinction.
But email is different because it can be tapped in by other people.
There are special rules that deal with internet
Right.
transfer of
Right, I can
information.
call, because it's child, it's not that I can't email, but I can only email in a secure server so that nobody can hack in there and get that information.
And you're okay with that?
Yeah, I think that there would be things that we would have to talk about how that, and I think that doesn't help us in the long run. Emailing it back and forth doesn't help us because we still have to do all the data entry.
Sure,
But,
but we're
you
trying to
know,
help
in the
them.
interim,
Yeah,
it could, and we have the SE Gov, it's our secure government thing. You have to name it a certain way in order for it to come into us. And so we can do that because we exchange secure information with counties right now through that system. So we would have to get you a username and a password and some of
But
that.
that,
We
that
can
means
do
you
it in
have
the
to get
meantime.
every mandated.
Or you can just do
doctor.
the data report to the portal line.
Right, and so that's what I'm
Right.
saying. I think we have to.
You could also
So
do
by
it though.
simplifying it, you're complicating it more.
Exactly.
Although
Right
there
now,
are certain mandated reporters that are a hospital, you know what I'm saying, Children's Hospital sends out, 500 reports a year. So maybe Children's Hospital gets a secure email, and Children's Philly, there's a couple people that get them, and it doesn't take care of everybody, but it really takes care of a vast majority of the, and a lot of, most of the
Oh,
police
right.
cases.
Okay, so without, is there anybody who argues that we should not draft this legislation to specifically authorize reports by email as well as voice?
I would just say electronic transmission.
Or electronic transfer, whatever the proper language is. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work, although, as I say, it may not be worth it to the doctor who makes 5 calls a year, but it's sure as hell worth it, because number one, it doesn't have to be the doctor, that's what I'm trying to do,
Well,
you
it
know?
doesn't have to, I mean, in a hospital, it doesn't have to be the doctor.
Okay, Jason's been very
I
patient.
would feel a lot more comfortable, I don't know why I'm hesitating about electronics, but if there's some mechanism in the drafting of legislation that requires confirmation of its receipt.
Yes,
Yes,
yep,
That's good.
yeah, it has to.
yep.
I don't know how that all
Right,
happens.
because I was gonna say,
Because-
we would be calling to see if the.
Right.
email
Well,
was
there's-
Right, oh yeah, oh my gosh, did they really get it?
Right.
Right.
Did somebody pick it up? Oh, I agree. Are they at their desk, are they in today?
Right.
I think that program, I think that happens pretty much automatically, but the other thing is, we're not relieving would suggest that that's not that burdensome, because for one thing, if you type it out in email form, it should be readily spit outable on a piece of paper, which you mail.
Spit outable.
Right.
So,
Penn State Hershey already has an online form for doctors to
Yeah,
use.
what
Penn
happened, I was
State
just
Hershey.
about to
no,
ask
we
what
can't
happened
take
with
it.
that.
You can't take that one?
Go ahead, Kathy.
Oh,
Well,
no.
first, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It was not tested. And so the things that you put in do not work. So we
Yeah,
have a
don't
meeting coming
use
up with them. And you cannot save it. So you can put it in and you can print it, but you cannot save that PDF. So you would be able to, you wouldn't be able to email it to us using that system.
maybe that
So
has
there's a
something
lot of
to do with
issues
it.
with that.
Yeah,
Tell us
well,
it doesn't
but
work.
listen, let's not get bogged down. If all of this is surmountable by a couple of geeks, we're gonna put it in the legislation, and
General authorization.
that the rest of it is, it's at worst meaningless. What's next?
Okay. Within that reporting up the chain of command, if you look at page 5, number 2 and number 3, well, number 2 says the person in charge is responsible for following up on the report within the institution. And then number 3 says the person in charge can't tamper with that report in any way.
I didn't, you know, when I read number 2, I wrote, what does this mean? Like, it was not clear to me when I read that number, when I read number 2, like, for the subsequent administration of the report within the institute, I was like, what? What
I
is
wonder
this?
what that is.
Yeah.
It meant following up on the report internally.
So upon notification, so like the person in charge shall assume the responsibility.
Can you look at the solicitor's recommended language?
I don't know what that was.
Yeah, there's that.
It was drafted with an eye towards bigger institutions.
Yeah, I remember there was something.
So it doesn't require any, you know, if you have the triage nurse and the x-ray technician and the, does that address her concern?
Could I just toss out, well, let's see what you guys think.
I don't know if that does it.
What perhaps not most artfully crafted, and I see I am guilty of that a lot. What the intent was to say that once the person in charge received the report, it's their responsibility to follow up on the report and investigate it and take charge of it. I don't know if we need it or not. I think I pulled that from another state, but
Yeah, we don't really need them to do that, because once it's reported,
yeah.
it's reported, and other people are responsible. So,
Because we don't need the language that they need.
Conduct and create.
Well, you have to be very careful because there are requirements on different institutions to do their own investigation.
That's
Particular-
right,
In
for
particular
Clery Act.
schools, the Cleary Act,
For the Clery Act, that's why it's there.
College.
The Clery Act is the,
it's not just college, I don't believe.
yeah, it's federal
Secondary?
law, and it requires reporting of crime statistics, and the penalty affects your ability for your students to receive financial aid.
oh, okay, okay.
It
yeah. So
it
you have to
particularly
report how
applies to
much
sex
crime
crimes
happened on
and
your college.
informing the general community. And it's also
Thank you,
Title
that's what I was
IX.
going for.
Also Title IX also
Right.
imposes a requirement to investigate. And that impacts local, high school level,
Okay.
high schools as well. So you gotta be careful.
So, yeah,
So
we
how
don't,
about, so why don't you say something like, you know, the person is responsible for maintaining, what are you maintaining? Like,
yeah, because we were trying to make it vague enough that we didn't spell out specific acts, they had to be in one. But yeah, that's what that was getting
maintaining
at.
statistics on,
But
on
except why do we
reports?
care about some federal act? I'm wondering,
Because if you
bound
But
by
that's
that
their
anyway.
problem, that's their problem. There is no reason, as I'm thinking about this, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so emphatic.
As a student, you had a lot of grants. I was really
Yeah, but that's between you and the college and the Cleary Act.
Well, it's not just about finances. It's not just about, it's about their requirement to investigate, to inform the general community about dangerous potential perpetrator of sex crimes in the community. That's what the Cleary Act does.
This
Well,
doesn't interfere with their,
this is,
duties under the Cleary Act.
I'm thinking that a better way to approach this, let me just toss this out, is, number one, we make clear that whoever encounters the abuse has to report. So all that crap that was in the
Right.
education section that we
have
took
that.
out of here, that's no echo of that, you know? It's, if I see the kid, I could be the janitor, I could be the low man on the totem pole, I could be a doctor, but not an administrator, I gotta report. And once I report, my name's on that report. The hell with my administrator, the hell with everybody else. If schools, hospitals, anybody can have whatever internal procedures they want as a term of your employment. Dr. Berger, you may have to report to 13 different people. But that's none of our business in a sense. So long as you report to Childline, you're good. Now, the thing I think we ought to put in for the benefit, and I remember Cindy and I talked about this the other night, that ought to be real easy for the medical community, but maybe tougher for others, is a protection for mandated reporters that if, and I would say, and actually you rattled off some good language. Do you think you can retrieve that in terms of, I was thinking of medical charts. Uniquely in medicine, the chart is the Bible with regard to that patient. And what I'm saying is, we don't want 13 different doctors at Children's, each of whom sees this kid, says, yep, that's the worst case of child abuse I ever saw, to have to report. As long as the chart says,
Something like documentation of a filed CY 47 shall relieve additional reporters from having to call child.
yeah, and that's what she said, or something like that. And it's real clear with doctors, because if the chart says it, then it's so.
Within
Maybe a
that
little
same
tougher for
institution?
others. Yeah.
Okay, but if somebody says, well, it was already reported by by the school, and then the kid goes to the hospital, it doesn't alleviate.
Gotta be,
Make
it's
sure.
gotta be documented.
It only alleviates if SUAS shows up with the
We
kid.
have lots of kids who we see in like our outpatient clinic for medical evaluations, who we know a report's already been made.
How do you know?
Because DHS asked us to see the kid.
SUAS
for
said,
their-
"I'll bring you a kid
scheduled
safe."
for their
Okay.
child advocacy center interview tomorrow. So we know.
But that's different than the mom bringing the kid in to see you.
Correct. But if we know that a report's been made, we don't just file another report.
Yeah, and you're probably
SUAS sends
safe.
it to us.
I mean, again, we're talking about mandated reporters and when we can prosecute you. You are no doubt safe if DHS did it. What I'm saying is we carve out a definite legislative safe haven if you've got some reliable documentary indication, either, as I say, medical charts like the gold standard, if you're in the school setting, the school has some
Can you just say
report or form.
like something like written documentation that a report has been made relieves additional,
I want to add to that, it's something like official, and maybe Yvonne, you can play around with that. My concern is, yeah, I write you a little note. Yeah, I flip you a Post-it note that says, oh yeah, I took care of that. I mean, it's got to be something that has a little,
I don't know if this is the same issue as the idea of the proxy caller, where in a hospital setting, usually the social worker or somebody else actually calls, but the mandated reporter of record needs to be not the social worker, but the physician. And I don't know if that's part of this same, because it brings up lots of other down the road issues in terms of who gets notified, who CWAS can talk to, who gets notified about the outcome. It depends on the mandated reporter, and that's, the Children's Hospital doesn't get a letter, right? It's the mandated reporter that gets a letter. And so traditionally, do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know how to put it, maybe it's not law, maybe
I
it's
don't-
statute.
yeah, I don't think we need to deal with that by statute. You already know because of the outcome you want, that practically speaking, you want your name on it as opposed to somebody else's. I want to make it as simple as possible. I don't care, frankly, as long as a report gets made, I don't care if it's the social worker. There are good reasons why you would want your name to be on it, and in fact, one of the other things we want to get to is guaranteeing that you guys get more feedback
I
than
think
you get
written
now.
documentation, an electronic medical record, if here's filing, we have a legal. So you go into legal, you open it up, there's a child line. I mean, it's
Yeah.
usually, as we go to electronic medical records, I think the sticky doesn't really exist. And I said, within 5 years,
I'm
everything
not,
will be
as
electronic.
I say,
I don't think it's in the chart.
medical, I'm not worried, because the chart, whatever you think of as the chart, is good enough for me. I'm more concerned about the school, the nursery school, there are a hell of a lot of
Volunteer
mandated reporters
coach.
that don't have, aren't in a formalized organization. And so we'll play around with the idea that documentation that is reliably within the organization, what we want to do is unburden mandated reporters as much as we can.
And another question is, I understand why you don't want anyone modifying, editing, or otherwise changing the contents of a report, but sometimes, like, I add to a report. So someone might start writing out a report, a CY 47, and then they say, okay, what about this? And I add things to it, or I clarify things, so I'm technically editing.
But if you're the
But you're not
reporter,
the person
it
in
doesn't
charge.
apply. It's only someone above you.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
person in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, any other concerns about
Well,
this?
no, they can
Like-
change it to make it accurate. So I've had residents put in, this kind of fracture, and I cross it out.
We're
because
not
they
the
written wrong
CEO of
thing.
the hospital, that's what they're saying. Like, you can't have you can't have the boss say, oh, we're not gonna put this in there.
The principal or the superintendent.
Right,
Right.
Doesn't sound like sexual abuse to
Exactly.
me.
right, horsing around, change that. Horsing around naked in the shower.
Hygiene.
Teaching hygiene.
I just like the text.
This is next to go.
Okay. The last part of this piece was talking about the immunity, and I didn't reproduce paragraph 1, but paragraph 1 is the immunity for everybody that says if you make a good faith report, you have immunity. And I believe this came, actually, I think it's Cindy's proposal, but B, that we said that if you're a mandated reporter and you file a report, the presumption is good faith in any kind of proceeding unless you show actual malice on the part of the mandatory reporter. So there was a little definition to make a slightly higher standard.
Right, someone had
To
to
protect
prove
you.
that it was malice.
Yeah, to prove that you were out to get them when you filed that report. Whereas we didn't put it in the general public because if I hate my neighbor and I file a report, you should be able to sue me for that. I wouldn't do that, but
You made it really hard, is what you're saying. Actual
trying to make
malice
it really
proof
hard.
is very
Actual
hard to
malice.
prove.
so.
I don't have to think.
Six,
Um,
probably.
Okay, and so, any questions, comments, discussion, we'll have that for next time. Now, the effect of that, because of the definition of school, which is actually in what we're going to take up next, will have the effect of pulling Penn State into the reporting obligations as we have reshaped them. And the effect would be that we've got every employee. So the janitor, and we've got contract employees, so if they contract out janitorial services, it's still the janitor who's,
The privilege, the religious or clergy privilege as it's called, have we addressed that issue? I'd like to move that the clergy privilege be removed in its entirety.
Can we do that?
I'm
Why
sorry,
can't
what
we?
did you say, Jason?
The clergy privilege.
As part of a confession, isn't that always protected?
Well, it is for testimony, as it is for evidence, but it's replicated here, the principle's the same.
Clergy, they almost uniformly exclude them.
In light of the same conviction that occurred on the day Sandusky was found guilty, we seem to forget that major case in Philadelphia when we talk about this. there's an abomination down there within the church, and I'm not pointing at any particular church, that they hide behind that shroud, and we need to figure out how to pierce it.
Some states will say, not in your normal, not as a clergy person per se, but only in the confessional or in a counseling session or something, so they'll limit it.
I would retreat to that position if you come up with the language, but
Yeah, I'm just,
until we have that, I would suggest it goes away.
She's like, if it's part of the confessional, or in therapy, it's okay. Any other time, it's not okay. You have to report.
Therapy?
I don't know, you just said therapy session or something. Pre-skip therapy, I don't know.
No, it's how you interpret therapy, whose therapy it is.
In the course of his duties as acquired information from any person secretly and in confidence shall be compelled.
But
But that's not what the Philly Archdiocese hit under. Philly Archdiocese hit under, I was the manager and the child was not directly informed. It wasn't the confessional privilege at all. That's what we added the
child did not come before me.
managerial level when we did the Archdiocese amendment.
And then how the school, remember I asked this question and I didn't understand the answer, so I'm gonna try it one more time. Okay, so then we had Act 179, is that the name of that act? That like,
It's like
right,
not
that
quite
the
sure.
child doesn't have to come before you anymore, right?
Right.
And then how did Penn State get around that?
They report to their supervisor.
Because they just used the school thing where they just reported it up and then eventually they just stopped and forgot about it?
Yeah.
They weren't mandated.
So we fixed both those problems.
The incident predated us then.
Yeah, the incident occurred prior to
It was the old law.
2006.
It was under the old law.
Yeah, under the
Not
old law, the
there's a
child had to come
2008
before the person.
Okay, but
there's a 2008,
But
Clinton
in,
County.
in 2010 or 11, did the school have an out, or did they just break the law? Like, was there a hiccup in the school provision of the law that gave them an out, or did they just ignore the laws that were?
The problem is that usually the school, when you're referring to school, it's just K through 12. I'm not sure that the college level.
So there was nothing that mandated them? There was nothing that mandated them?
It's just.
It depends on how you
Yeah,
interpret
it's
it.
probably
It's
not
not clear.
interpreted how you
Cover
cover
it,
because of
yeah.
like care and custody and.
So at the time of the shower incident, which was before 2006, or around 2006, the law said the child had to come before the person that was required to report. And that was changed in,
2006.
was it changed in 2006?
Yeah.
Okay. And now it says comes into contact with children, and then it goes on to define what that means later. So that's the, I mean, right now, Curly and, what's the other guy's name?
Mo, Schultz.
Right, they haven't been convicted yet, but I'm assuming that the prosecutions are under that mandated reporter
Their
section.
prosecution for perjury purposes.
Aren't they being prosecuted for failing to report as well?
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's gonna be real questionable about whether or not they get convicted.
right.
Because it was before 2006.
Some of
Yeah,
them.
or, yeah,
But if
before
it's
that
happened
changed.
after 2006,
Now it
is there
says,
a part of the law that they can like loop out of, kind of, you know what I mean? Because they were a college or university and therefore school requirements
Well,
apply.
It can, because the way that school employee is written, it's a public or private school, intermediate unit, area vocational, technical school. And so when you look at those, they could, because universities and colleges don't necessarily fall under that public or
But it
private
does-
school.
it does say public or private institution.
Right.
So I think there's an argument to be made, Penn State is a
Right,
public or
public
private institution, but the language is this, that person shall immediately notify the person in charge of the institution, school, facility, or agency, or the designated agent of the person in charge. So the janitor should have notified someone who should have notified Spaniard. Upon notification, the person in charge or the designated agent, if any, shall assume the responsibility and have the legal obligation to report or cause a report to be made in accordance with 6313, which means that once the first person who actually sees the abuse makes that
follow up on that clergy exception and see if there's a way to narrow it. I think we did talk about that a little bit
We did.
before. I think I had listed it as an issue, but hadn't gotten to it. So we can look at that.
So what are we up to now?
I think,
Can I go back and ask another question about definition? Are we keeping imminent risk in our definitions?
I'd like not to, we discussed that the reason for imminent risk is that the federal CAPTA legislation requires that your law prevent kids from being an imminent risk. I'm thinking you can do that, but you can get that effect. I mean, we make the changes we're making. I think everybody agrees we're making the law a lot stricter. We are protecting children more than the present law does.
You might